So I want to welcome everybody to another session of our SALT Talks Lunch and Learn. My name is Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Trainer Coordinator for the SALT Talks. Today we have a guest speaker, Shane Krugler. He is an attorney and located in the Hamilton area. I heard this presentation a couple years ago from Dale Maloney, and Shane was part of that presentation as well. I'll let Shane talk a little bit more about all that. But I thought this presentation, the information that was shared, I'm like, oh man, this has got to be good to my parents, or all the people that doing SALT Talks, because it was really helpful information and worksheets and everything. So I'm going to turn it over to Shane. And let you introduce yourself and go ahead with your presentation.
Sounds great. Thank you, Patty. I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So I do apologize, Dale Maloney, who's actually the author of the book that we're going to be spending the majority of the time talking about today, was unable to make it. Usually we do these presentations with about 5 of us, and we'll talk about all those different pillars of the presentation that we typically give. But we usually have a financial advisor, an accountant, a lawyer, which is myself, who does estate planning, elder law, and then we have obviously Dale as the book author, and his wife, Lynn. Unfortunately, everything that we're going to be talking about today and planning for the unexpected, Dale is currently dealing with. He's been a long time cancer survivor, and he's been unfortunately in and out of the hospital, primarily in the hospital, for a few months now, dealing with a health issue. So with that said, I'll do the best that I can to give his book and everything that we discuss, or he normally discusses, justice. So jumping right into it, I'm going to switch over to the actual presentation that we have prepared. Hopefully that'll work out pretty well for me. Let's see what happens. All right, I'm just going to share my screen. And here we go. All right. Does that look good, Patty? Can you see the special needs, family protection and preservation?
Yes, I can see it.
All right, excellent. So as we jump into the conversation today, it's all about really planning. So Dale and I met each other approximately 5 years ago when I was just starting my practice after my father-in-law had a medical emergency, ended up moving in with us. And through that process, he was meeting with different families the same way that I was, talking about planning and his journey and how this book came about. So everything we're going to be talking about over the next 20 minutes is really about doing everything, or at least discussing everything that you should or could be doing to make sure that you're prepared for the inevitable when that eventually comes, whether that's temporarily incapacity, or dealing with death, or just transitions from minor children to potentially independent living on their own. So that being said, life-changing events is what we're talking about today. As many of you are probably well aware at this point, that changing events are exceptionally difficult. Even just having kids going off to college from school, or having parents or other in-laws potentially going into long-term care. There's always a lot more complexity related to life-changing events than we typically think about. So today we're going to be walking through how to prepare for all of that. So again, my name is Shane Krugler. I'm the owner of Krugler Law. We do estate planning and elder law. We're located in Cincinnati. We have 2 attorneys, one paralegal and one administrator. Just a quick personal information, been married for 20 years to my high school sweetheart. We have 3 children, ages 7 to 11. And in 2017, I was actually a lawyer working in compliance and ethics for banks when my father-in-law was diagnosed with brain cancer. During a biopsy, he had a traumatic brain injury due to a bleed and became paralyzed, and moved in with us at that time. So our life changed dramatically. And I quit my banking practice to really start working on with him full time in our home, and taking him in and out of the facilities. He was at Drake and some other places, and really taking care of him. I grew a passion for elder law and estate planning and everything we're going to be talking about today. And that's really how I met Dale and Lynn Maloney. They are the authors of the book, Build Your Legacy Guide, which we'll be talking about today. He worked for Fidelity and has an MBA. I think he was there for approximately 40 years. His wife, Lynn, was with the U.S. Postal Service for about 30. They've been married for over 15 years. They have 5 adult children. And the reason that their book really came about is they actually met each other after they both lost their spouses to cancer at an earlier age. and they had a trip to Israel a few years ago. They were flying over the ocean, or thinking about flying over the ocean, and Lynn really got concerned about what does life look like if something were to happen to us, if this plane were to go down on the way to Israel. What are we doing to make sure that our family's taken care of and that everything's covered? And she had a bit of a mild panic attack getting prepared for everything. And that's really how this book came to be. So everything that I was dealing with kind of culminated with everything that Dale and Lynn was dealing with. And we started doing really these tours around really, I guess, all of Hamilton County, Butler County, Warren County. I think we've probably done close to a dozen talks by now, primarily with churches and cancer survivor groups. So today we're going to walk through really an abbreviated version of that conversation. So we're going to talk about the 10 steps that you must take to change or to take charge of your child's future and build a fortress of protection. We're really kind of integrating this to where we're really speaking about two different audiences here. So depending on who's on the call today, we're really focusing on you yourselves, right? And making sure, knowing that you're a pillar of support for your family and potentially your child or loved one with special needs, as well as making sure that we're setting up the future for your child or loved one with special needs appropriately so that they themselves have a plan. All right, so to kick it off, 3 simple questions. What would happen to your child with special needs if you did not come home today? How much support are you providing? What information do you have? And what do they rely on you to make sure that they're living a fruitful life day to day? What would happen to your other children, spouse, and others you care for if something were to happen to you? And then third, and usually the least important, but still something to consider, is what would happen to your belongings and everything that you have, and making sure that everything that you have today is transitioning to your family appropriately. So we've kind of broken it down into 10 easy steps to consider as we go through the process. First and foremost is documenting your important information and expectations so that your family will know what you want and how to handle it. This is really where Dale and Lynn's book, Build Your Legacy Guide, comes into play, and what we're going to be really speaking of the most of today's conversation. All right. So as I alluded to earlier, when I met with Dale, we have multiple professionals in the room that are really working holistically on helping everyone understand planning for estate planning, investments, insurance, and taxes. So we kind of have those 4 pillars, as you can see here in this slide. And then where Dale comes in is he took all of our expertise and figured out how to more effectively document everything that's going on in all 4 of those planning groups together, and making sure that there's a communication plan in place for your family. All right, so Dale and Lynn, if they were here, this is them. We're going to spend a few minutes actually jumping out to their website here in a minute and listening to a quick video so you get an opportunity to hear a little bit more about them and their story. But as part of the process, the way that they've developed this book, which we're going to jump into, is what do we need to do to basically get everything on paper to document what our lives look like, from managing our pets' care to managing our own medical care to our financials to essentially every type of bit of planning that you could consider. He has a book that's approximately 300 pages. We're not going to go through all 300 pages today, but the way that the process works is you basically select all the information that's most appropriate to your life. So even though it's I think it's about 250 pages total book, you may only be utilizing, say, 40 or 50 pages or a small amount of those checklists. But what he's done and where I've really found a lot of value is when I work with my clients and we create their estate plans, we communicate those plans out to their family. One of the challenges that always come to be is when my clients come to meet with me for the first time, quite honestly, they haven't even considered a lot of the information that we're talking about today. So we send them out an initial questionnaire before we meet with our clients. And it usually takes them a couple of hours just to complete the information because everything is so spread out. And what Dale's done along with Lynn is they've taken all this information that all of your professional support network is looking for and consolidating it into an easy to find and identify location. All right, so before we jump into the book itself, I'm going to switch over to his website. So the website that you'll want to refer to later is buildyourlegacyguide.com, and we'll have a link to that later on in the presentation. But what I want to do here is just kind of give you a quick introduction to the book and the way that they've rolled it out. So let me pull this. I believe I can put it over here. There we go. And then Patty, can you give me a validation that you're seeing their website currently?
No, it's like you moved it. I can see the comprehensive communication plan screen.
Okay, so let me switch this over. One moment here.
Yeah, I can see they're oh, gone.
Oh, so
There it is. It's there.
okay, you can see it currently. All right,
Yeah.
I've got a couple screens I'm dealing with. Sorry about that. All right, here we go. We're going to start this over. It's only 2 minutes. And Patty, can you hear the sound on this?
No.
So there's 3 sections.
There.
There's the now section, which covers everywhere you are in your life now, your doctors, pharmacy, investments, where they are, your bank, et cetera, et cetera. The second part of the book is the if then section, which should there be a change in your life situation, or maybe you're incapacitated to some degree. Third part of the book is the after section. At this point, you passed away, and now your service has to be planned, and then after that, beyond that, then your estate has to be dissolved. So this book acts as a tool for the administrator of your estate to then go ahead and dissolve all your assets. And the way that you have written it in the book, the way that makes it easy and understandable for anyone, so that there is no conflict. So it's a great tool for the administrator of your estate.
You'll provide peace of mind that you've thought through and have not avoided those typical questions we don't like to ask ourselves about our lives. Secondly, is that you will really be a gift to your loved ones, so that after the fact, if something would happen, there's no regrets or concerns about, I'm not sure what mom or dad wanted. Lastly, is by doing this, you're clearly saving thousands of dollars by taking it and avoiding your costly legal fees, or not being aware of insurance or advance payments you've made, or warranties that cover things that your families would not be aware of. Take the time right now to show how much you love your family and how you best bless them with everything you've done by going to our website, buildyourlegacyguide.com, purchase our book.
All right. Okay, are we back there, Patty? Can you see my comprehensive communication plan now? All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to let you know, Dale and Lynn have graciously agreed to actually provide this book to you, all of you, free of charge at the end of the conversation. So don't think of that as a pitch at all to buy their book. It really is a fantastic tool to making sure that the life that you're leading now is something that can continue into what they consider your now, then, and later stages of your life. They have a unique story that they always give when we're in this conversation that I'm not going to give it justice to. But long story short, they had a really good friend who was taking a particular medication that the family did not know about. When she became temporarily incapacitated, they didn't know she was taking this medication. And she got to the point that she was actually in the ICU and almost passed away until they identified which medication she was on, because they did not have contact with her doctors that were able to give her that information. So a lot of what they did when they created this book was utilize their own life experiences and those of their friends and saying, okay, what can we do to make sure that this transitions better? So not only can this communication plan, this book, and everything that we do from an estate planning perspective, obviously help you during your time of need. Most of what we do, especially as it relates to estate planning, is making sure that your family is taken care of, right? Most of what we talk about when we talk about estate planning is about a selfless act. You're really trying to spend time and money and resources now to make sure that your family is taken care of long after you're gone. So the way this book works, which we're going to jump into in a few minutes, is it has a master list, which I'm going to switch over to real quick. Patty, you can see that there? Okay, excellent. So the whole book itself, just to let you know, is not a hard copy. It's all an e-file book. It's electronic. And the reason that it's set up that way is because it's all about inputting information, right, that supports what's happening in your life. So when you open up this ebook, if you choose to purchase it or really get it for free, it's broken up into multiple sections, and you only utilize the sections that are important to you. So the first step in the book is really going through this master checklist and finding out what makes sense that you should be recording now. So what is your primary care information, your medical insurance, your immediate family summary, the contact information, everyone that you're dealing with outside of your immediate family, your pets, medications, insurance, all the things that you don't necessarily think about if you're having some type of medical emergency or transition in your life. Your critical contacts, including all your professional support people, your income, your investments, physical assets, and licensed vehicles. So as you go through that, you'll see, if I switch back to my other screen here real quick, there we go, that's just kind of an overview of everything that they have. It goes even further into where you keep secured storage information, your legal documents, tax information, any types of debts, monthly expenses. A lot of the challenges that we see here with estate planning when someone becomes incapacitated or they pass away is everything is so digital anymore that a lot of people, when they pass away, their accounts could stay open for a year or 2 years, and any type of subscriptions that you have to Netflix or to any type of services, whether it's media related or healthcare related, those expenses typically don't stop until the money in those accounts have actually been eliminated. So one of the things that's really important that I love about this particular book is it allows you to go in there and really start documenting all these different things that you're not thinking of that are potentially being draws on the assets that you're really setting aside for your family. So as we go further into the book, let me show up a next section. So if we go to the top, you can see that it's broken up into primary categories. You have the main categories, which are the ones that you select that you want to use or not use in your planning. The secondary category is really getting into the specific information related to the individual areas. So for my care, for instance, it goes in and talks about your allergies, your surgeries, chronic illnesses, the medications that you're taking, all very important, kind of going back to that story that we talked about before. It has a section to discuss special needs and genetic tendencies. It goes in exceptionally great detail and making sure that if something were to happen to you, people have a fantastic resource to utilize for either you or your loved ones. And then the third category is really allowing you to break it down even further into these particular areas if you have a complex issue. So jumping into my care, for instance, this is section 1.0105. It's a numeric system that allows you to navigate the entire book, but it goes in here and gives you all the information related to your electronic medical records. If you have something set up through individual hospitals or through the state, then this allows you to have all the information for logging into the sites. It goes into specific allergies, the doctors that manage those allergies, risks, treatments. I don't want to overwhelm you here, but it goes into past surgeries and all the supporting information there. Here we get into chronic recurring diseases. So you can see that it breaks down each category and allows you to put any information in that you need, that you feel is appropriate. It allows you to put in all your doctor's contact information. With the special needs, it has a section to talk about what the special needs are, generally speaking, in more of an open setting. And then we have information for the genetics. So as you go through it, you'll see that each of them are kind of broken up into those different subgroups that we saw earlier. So as we go through it here, you can see that it's broken up. And then the way that the tool works is once you download it one time, so if you utilize it today, you go out there and you download it, you can utilize it as many times as you want. And it's something that you can save directly to a digital environment. But quite honestly, a lot of my clients just put it on paper format. It's a big booklet, so make sure you're choosing the ones appropriately. But that being said, most of my clients, especially my older ones, do just print out the pages they need, and they usually keep it as a partner binder with their estate plan. So if something were to happen, they've got all their documents that take care of them from a legal perspective, as well as all the documents that fill in all the blanks that we as lawyers don't necessarily consider when we're making sure that we have an effective communication plan. All right, so let's get back over to the presentation here. All right, there we go. So actually, let me jump back real quick to the last one to give you this information so you have it early. If you're interested in actually downloading the Build Your Legacy Guide, you can go to buildyourlegacyguide.com. It's a great website, go through it, but eventually you'll land on the shop page where you can download the entire expert edition, which is valued at $29.97 if you didn't have the code today. But again, they were gracious enough to provide it to you for free if you're interested. And the coupon code that you'll use for that is Legacy for You. Now, the code does expire within 30 days, so make sure that you go in earlier rather than later to get that. And if you have any issues, or you happen to go past the 30 days and you're still interested, I'm sure you can reach out to Patty, myself, or Dale, and we can help you out. But it does have a 30-day expiration date on it. All right. So jumping back we've got about 10 minutes. So we're going to jump back into what are the other 9 things that you should consider as you're defining this communication plan. 1, identify the need for future care planning. If you have a child or an adult with special needs that you're taking care of them, are they self-sufficient? If they're not self-sufficient, what do you do and what are the resources you have to make sure that they're being taken care of in the long term? And then do you have contingency plans for those plans if it fails? If you have a caregiver that's out of town or on vacation when something were to happen, do we have the next people in line to potentially call? Third is considering a guardianship of the person in the estate. I'm not going to touch on this one too much. I think Patty just posted the guardianship training that happened earlier this week. I had a chance to listen to some of it earlier today. It's fantastic, but sometimes there's arguments for guardianship, sometimes there's not, depending on the person that you're taking care of potentially. I have some clients that do not have guardianships that have severe autism in there and really a few other issues in their 30s, and they still don't have guardianship. So just make sure you talk to a lawyer about whether guardianship is appropriate or not in your particular decisions. And then what are other alternatives to guardianship, such as healthcare power of attorneys, financial power of attorneys, everything related to you being able to step aside to assist someone without them potentially losing their rights to make their own decisions in the long term. Next is plan for and secure for government benefits. Probably many of you are already aware of all the different benefits that are out there that exist: Social Security, disability insurance, supplemental security income, Medicare, Medicaid, and how do those all work together to make sure that your loved ones are getting the financial support that they need and deserve. Fifth is creating a life care plan, especially for your loved ones who have special needs. Have you identified and documented all the appropriate public and private resources, such as SALT, to making sure that those individuals are being taken care of, and that the people who would be there to potentially support them know what resources are out there? Above and beyond that, develop an appropriate financial plan, whether that be a revocable trust where you're thinking about the long-term needs of your family, or an irrevocable trust where you're setting things up for your child with special needs or your loved one with special needs. And then there's other financial planning that the state provides as well, such as stable accounts. And you can use all these in tandem, honestly, to create an effective financial plan going forward. Next is this is a step up in the revocable living trust planning. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about probate, but if you don't have an effective plan and something were to happen to you, your assets can go multiple ways. Unfortunately, one of those ways is through the probate court, where things get really complex and expensive. So having a revocable trust is a way that you can avoid some of those issues. Again, I'm not going to deep dive into that. That's another hour-and-a-half conversation. But just consider this as part of your planning and something that you would probably want to speak to an attorney about as you move forward through this journey. Next is establishing a special needs trust, potentially. If you have a child or a loved one who is in need of an irrevocable trust because they themselves are getting of their government benefits, a special needs trust may be appropriate. There's multiple types of special needs trusts to consider. There's something called a third-party supplemental needs trust. That's where the parent or a loved one creates an irrevocable trust for that child so that they don't lose their Medicaid benefits. And then if they ever pass away, the money that's in that irrevocable trust doesn't go back to pay for Medicaid when Medicaid tries to claim that money later. You have something called a first person or a self-settled special needs trust, which is actually set up by the person who has the special need. Typically, it's related to when someone's getting benefits that they weren't necessarily expecting during an inheritance or after an injury. And then finally, there's something called a pooled special needs trust. There's a few different companies in the state of Ohio that offer pooled trusts that basically allows a third party to come in and step in and act as the trustee. And then that money goes back to the nonprofit, which is who manages this pooled special needs trust, as well as Medicaid. So these are a few options that you have in the special needs trust forum, something to consider. Again, I highly recommend speaking with an attorney as you go through the process and learning which one is best for you, because they all have different levels of involvement and the way that they pay out after you were to pass or your loved one were to pass away. So it's a complex area. Just make sure that you're aware of it as you go forward. All right. Moving on to number 8, we have build a team. You're probably well aware of this at this point as well, but it takes a village, right? So make sure you're identifying everyone that you have in your life who's going to be able to continue to provide assistance if something were to happen to you temporarily or permanently. Do you have long-term guardians if necessary? Do you have short-term guardians? A quick story. We moved here in 2005 and we don't have family in the tri-state area. So when we started having our children, we realized, we looked around, we didn't have family and friends, and we had date nights, and we realized if something happened to us, even in the short term, and we had a babysitter, how is that going to be handled if something happens? What plan can we put in place to make sure that we have the appropriate people that are close enough to where they can step in and assist until longer term solutions are available? So thinking again about the short term and the long term consequences of particular issues, having trustees as relates to your trust and making sure you're vetting those trustees so that they have the best interest of your family. Having something called attorneys in fact, an attorney in fact, if you're not familiar, is just the person who would be responsible for helping manage your financial affairs or your healthcare affairs through a power of attorney. You also have care advocates through the counties, through the states, through your local communities that are also fantastic resources. And obviously, first and probably foremost is family members and making sure that they're well educated to the needs that you're potentially leaving behind. All right, number 9 is provide enough financial resources. So a lot of people don't think in the long term about what they need to do to make sure that they're setting their family up appropriately. So generally speaking, especially if you have someone that you're managing full time who has special needs, what is the financial resources do you have? Are they properly documented? Do you have a particular plan? Do you have insurance or other options? Have you considered the long-term effects of the resources that you currently have? How can inflation and taxes potentially affect the money that you've saved? So I'm not a financial advisor, but as you go through these are high-level things that you should be thinking about as you develop this plan. And finally, pass on more than just your money. A lot of people think about what is the well-being of the family that I'm leaving behind? How do I make sure that that's assured? How do I make sure that they have enough resources, money, etc., to live the life that you expect them to live? A lot of people don't necessarily think about all the other intangibles that you're passing on to your family. What are your intellectual and spiritual values that you want to leave behind? What are your most cherished memories that you'd want your family to know about? How do you express, especially if you were to have an unexpected passing, how do you make sure that you're expressing your love for your family if you're no longer with them? And then how will your children remember you in the long term? So there is information both in his book and as part of generally speaking, a comprehensive estate plan that allows you to capture the intangibles above and beyond what you're doing if you're working with the right people. So something you definitely want to consider. So with that, we've talked about a lot in a very, very short period of time. You don't have to do this alone, right? A lot of us feel that we're kind of on an island. I know that I do in managing my family because I don't have a lot of support, but know that in order to do this effectively, you really should be thinking about who are the other resources that you have available in your life, whether free or paid, that can help you through this process. So who are you using to organize your information? Hopefully that's going to be Dale in his book, since it's a free resource. It'll kick you off in the right direction. Who do you talk to about taxes, insurance, investments, estate planning, and then making sure that all those things are being communicated effectively. And then finally, so next steps. If you're interested in learning more about Krugler Law, you can just give us a call. I'm sure Patty will have our contact information out there. I don't have it directly on this slide, but the way that we work, just to let you know, is everything that we do is flat fee. We do no cost consultations where we kind of advise you to what your plan looks like today. So if you don't necessarily have a plan, we let you know what the state laws are as it relates to how everything is managed for you and your loved ones. We develop a plan while you're here. We quote flat fees, and the expectations when we work with you is we're working with you and your family long term. We want to be a continued pillar in your journey through life. And then finally, as we talked about earlier, to utilize Dale and the book that he and Lynn have created, Build Your Legacy Guide, just go out to buildyourlegacyguide.com and use the code legacy for you. So with that, I know that we are right at 30 minutes, Patty. So I'm going to hand that back over to you to wrap it up and ask questions or whatever's necessary. Thank you.
Gosh, that's a lot of information. Thank you, Shane. You really you covered a lot of it quite well. Does anybody have any questions for Shane? I was watching the chat box. If there are any specific questions anybody has for Shane today. You can unmute, or if you want to just type in the chat box, that's fine too. We did put the link in there, and I think to use the code, you got to go into shop, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, you go into when you get to the link, you go into shop and use the code. Does that now? One question I have, like I listened to the presentation a couple years ago. How often does any of this information? It's pretty like baseline information. Has there been any changes or updates, or do they get to make any changes or updates to it? Or
so there haven't been any, I'll say, material updates in the last few years. I actually talked to Dale. I texted Dale this morning because he's having challenges talking to ask him that question, and things have primarily stayed the same. However, they are really reactive to any thoughts that people have. So as you've gone through this process and you go through this book, if you find that there's something that's missing, especially as it relates to enhancing particular sections, say related to the special needs, they would implement that in no time at all and make sure that those changes are met for everyone going forward. So that's a great question.
I think just being able to, be able to on your own, like at home, to collect the information and get this all together, do a section a night or something, whatever, it's going to take a while. It's a lot of information, but to just be able to take the time, break it down, and, have your cup of coffee and start working your way through it, I think is a very helpful tool, especially with it being online. Like you said, if you print it out, watch your printing, because it is several pages. Yeah. So, but thank you, Shane. Is there any questions before we close today? Oh, let's see. Someone asked, what was the coupon code again? And the other one is, what happens to the children and families that are not prepared or having a passing while they're in the middle of settling things? That would be a question for you, Shane.
Sure. So to answer your first question, the code is legacy for you with the number 4 and the letter U. So legacy for you. Now, what happens to the children and families who are not prepared? That is a complex question, but if you haven't named guardians and we're dealing with children or minors, the way that works is it would go through the probate court, and believe it or not, the judge is the one who would hear everybody come in who are interested in potentially taking over the guardianship, and the judge gets to make that decision. So the expectation is it would have to go through probate court, and the judge makes that final decision. Now, if you have a last will and testament or other formal legal writing that names the guardian, they take that into account. When you talk about guardianship real quick, the state of Ohio breaks guardianships into 2 pieces. You have something called the guardianship of the person, which is really the well-being of the child, making sure that they're well taken care of, they have a roof, they're being fed. And then you have something called the guardian of the estate, which is managing the financial resources of that child. And the court gets to make the decision on who takes over those responsibilities. Sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's different people depending on the situation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
Perfect. Okay, good.
Let's see. Can you have one attorney for everything, living will, special needs trust, guardianship, etc., or are there different types of attorneys depending on what you need, on what the need?
Sure. So you definitely can have it, and most people recommend utilizing one attorney for the majority of those things. It depends on what the attorney's qualifications are. Quite honestly, if you're going to a general practitioner, you probably wouldn't want to focus on all those. If you're working with a firm that does simply guardianships or estate planning, I think you can absolutely get those done all in the same place. From a legal perspective, the only thing you really have to be concerned about there is potential guardianships, because what happens is you can create all the documents for a particular person, but as they get older, If they need guardianship, that's actually considered against the interests of the person that's going to apply for that guardianship. So you get into a situation where you've drafted all the documents, say for a loved one who's older, they refuse to go into long-term care and continually are potentially hurting themselves or others. Then the attorney who represented the older person in drafting their documents cannot step in to do a guardianship against them. So that's about the only conflict you would see. Other than that, absolutely, we typically handle all these in one place.
And then there's do you need an attorney or can you draw up your own living will?
So a few thoughts on that as well. You do not need an attorney under the law. There's actually a living will form that's a statutory form that you can get off of the internet. It's an Ohio statutory living will. Know that not all documents are necessarily created equal. So if you do your own living will, I would highly recommend that you use the statutory form and not a different form. Kind of scrolling back up to make sure I answered all of that question. And then just to let you know, a lot of people are confused between the difference between a living will and a last will and testament. They are different documents. A last will and testament allows you to name a guardian and make sure all of your assets are going to whom you want them to go to. Whereas a living will is a document that says if you ever become permanently incapacitated, so think vegetative state, that document allows you to be removed from life support, IVs, feeding tubes, and really receive any type of pain medication so that you can pass naturally. So don't get those two documents confused. But yeah, you can, in theory, do all these on your own. Just be very cautious if you do that and do your research because there's a lot of potential missteps.
And it looks like Shauna was asking, does your firm do all?
We do. We specialize in estate planning and elder law. Those are our primary areas of practice. We do.
And it looks like Kathy just made a comment. Yeah, it is overwhelming. And I imagine as you get into it and get familiar, it will help. And also we did last night, we had a guardianship 101. So some of the terminology used, you can listen to that. It's on YouTube. And I can gladly send you the link if you don't have it. It's on our schedule. And we shared some of that information last night if you attended.
So Patty, can I say one more thing?
Mhm.
When you look at the whole of everything we're doing, right, it is complex and it is overwhelming, and people get into something called analysis paralysis, right? We've heard of that term. So my recommendation is if you have to, put some blinders on and really consider what you think to be the most important thing that you should be focusing on right now. Take that first bite, right? And then as you go through that process and you've got that in place, then start expanding what you believe are your priorities. So that you can move further on down the list. And the next thing you know, over 6 months or a year, you're going to be where you never thought you could be. So just know that Dale's book actually is a fantastic way to help you prioritize what you believe is most important in your life.
All right, very good. Thank you for all that information, Shane. And if you have any further questions, like if you want to get in touch with Shane, I can send out, just email me and I can forward the email to Shane, or I guess you can also look up in the Krugler law, probably.com. Is that correct?
Yep, KruglerLaw.com. And if you do work with us, on a slide earlier, I said, we just make sure you mention this webinar. We'll give you $500 off a comprehensive estate plan. And if you don't do a comprehensive estate plan because you're taking bites, we'll work to give you a discount there as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for all that information. I want to thank everybody who attended today. We always try to touch on subjects that, during our lunch and learn, like quick subjects, just to give you a chance midday to give something else to chew on, So I want to thank everybody that came today. And next week, we'll be meeting with our SALT teens and me on Tuesday night. And we'll be talking about living safely in my home with Safe and Home. So thank you all for coming and have a great rest of your afternoon. I'll stay on for a few minutes in case there's some more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Let me